Welcome back to Roundtail Restoration, everybody. My name's Chris. Next to me here is the motor of my 1964 Triumph TR4. Still obviously putting it back together, a bunch of auxiliary stuff left to do. Probably one of the biggest things is the water pump, so we'll get that done. I got that back from the Flying Dutchman, so that's all nice and pretty and restored now. Get that guy on there, and then probably take a pause from the motor work for a little while. The frame's been sitting there, and I need to refocus on that, so I start getting that built back up. But for now, we're sticking with the motor. So thanks for watching. Let's get it sorted. Quick correction, in my last video I showed you guys how to put the distributor in, or at least the pedestal and the gear in there and everything like that. And one of my longtime viewers and subscribers, Robin, pointed out that the distributor gear, where the notches are that go where the distributor mates with the drive gear, is offset a little bit. The workshop manual doesn't mention this, and nothing really mentions it. So Robin pointed it out to me that I didn't make the point of pointing that out. So at first I didn't really understand what he was talking about, and I looked at the bottom of the distributor and I didn't really see anything obvious. So I decided today to bring it over here and check it out. Looked at the gear, and the gear you can't really see, it's obvious. But upon further inspection of the distributor itself, I'll see if I can get you a close-up here. So that is the distributor drive gear end where it mates, and you can see that two little slots here, this guy and this guy. And you really can't see it very well. Try to get it right in the center of the camera. But if you look at the center, it is offset to one side. And in the orientation I have it here, these two teeth are a little bit set down as compared to set up. So what that means is you're controlled 180 degrees by which way the distributor will go in. So 50-50, 90 shot, as we used to say in the Navy. And of course, I've got the bad one. So this is now set up top dead center on the compression stroke, and that's kind of right there where it should be, about pointing to number one, and the distributor's not going any further. But if I point it 180 degrees out, try to push it down and mate it, it goes all the way in and it locks in. So unfortunately, I'm off 180 degrees. So what's that mean? Well, that means that the pedestal is going to come out back off, and I'll need a new gasket, so I guess I'm glad I bought another one and get that cleaned up. However, when I was going to torque this down, this stud stripped out on me, so I've just got a bolt in there now holding it, so I need to get a new stud. I can't believe I don't have one laying around somewhere, but I don't. So that the pedestal is going to come off here. I'll redo the gasket, put that guy back down, and do a little bit of rework here. So thanks a lot, Robin, for pointing that out. And for all of you that may be scratching your head or wondering what's going on, there you go. So again, I couldn't find it in the workshop manual, so something to pay attention to, something to look at, something to go back and fix if you made the mistake like I did. A little bit of rework here. I had got the timing chain cover back on and everything, and it was all set up. And when I was screwing the bolts on, I had forgotten that this pedestal bolt here is fine threads on the outside, and I grabbed the wrong bolt, unfortunately, and started with a coarse threaded bolt. And the threads were not in perfect shape anyway, so once it started to go, it was a little bit tight, but not too bad, and I just ended up stripping it out. So I had to get a new one of those from Moss, and obviously to be able to do that, you got to take everything back apart. I also, when I was putting it on, I had forgotten about this oil flinger down here, so you can't forget that. So obviously that's on now. So I've got this down in there and tight and lock washered in. So I'm going to go ahead and essentially start over again. Got a new gasket. Get that on there, get the aviation format gasket on there, and get ready to put a new timing chain cover on. Old timing chain cover, new attempt. So we'll get that done. As you can see, I got this painted in gasket sealer. The engine plate here, I'm going to take the one side of the gasket, which I also have painted. Set that up there. I'm going to do the gasket on this first because I've got a couple bolts and a couple dowel pins in here that I can use to help me line stuff up. Kind of get that stuck on there. That'll help me keep it honest here. And then I've already got timing cover painted. Now I'll go around and hit that side of the gasket real quick and get that painted up. Don't want to forget the tensioner. I got that standing by with a new cotter pin and its little washer. use gloves if I just didn't already say that, because this stuff gets everywhere. All right, now the tensioner. There's not really a good way to keep the tensioner, if I'm doing it this way, there's not really a good way to keep the tensioner out of the what's it called? But, you know, I'm not too concerned about it. It's going to get gumped up anyway, and anything that really matters will get taken off. Little cotter pin. All right, tensioner, cotter pin. I already tightened this guy up. I got what I need on here. Already got the seal, got the oil flinger. Looking. I don't see anything else. So we're just going to go ahead in and kind of put it on kind of crooked so I can grab the inside of that tensioner and tension it. You kind of put it on and then grab the tensioner with the side of it and kind of bend it across and get it lined up where it needs to line up. And that's about it. So some people seem to have a lot of problems with the tensioner at times. I'm not quite sure why. But like I hope I showed you there, if you kind of put it on a little crooked, you'll be all right. So now that that's set up, now I got to get a couple bolts on here, get the thing started to get tight so I can get this gasket started to get sealed. All right, so that top one there goes into the water jacket. So like I had showed you on a couple of the holes down at the bottom, I think. I've used this stuff before. This is the thread sealant with PTFE. It's like the stuff you would use in your bathroom at home and on a spool, except it's a liquid form. And just put it around the threads a little bit of the bolt, just to provide a little bit of extra sealant on there. And everything else is just pretty much bolt for bolt. Get them all going first, because I do, like I had mentioned, I think I do have some of the gasket material that's a little off. Now the workshop manual just call out different sizes for some of these, and frankly I would never been able to figure out what sizes go where. And I did reach out and ask, and nobody really had a good answer on what sizes go where. So be it. I'm not that worried about it. All right, then the final 4 bolts over here. You might notice that 2 of them for me are longer than the other 2, and again, that's because I bought what the workshop manual said, and then could never figure out which is supposed to go where. But they did call out for the longer bolts to be fine thread, which means they're not going into the block. So this is the only place I could figure where they might have gone in. So that's what I did. Who knows? I might even undo it when I'm done. But for now, like I've done with other gaskets, I want to get these gaskets in here. Get this stuff tightened down so that I can get the gasket set up, and then I'll worry about it later. Still not happy with my plating. The zinc itself is coming out okay, but the black stuff is just not working out for me. All right, so I'm not going to bore you with tightening these bolts up. Go around and tighten all these bolts, 14 to 16 foot-pounds. So we'll get them all torqued up, and then we'll move on to, I'll show you some other things here, and then we'll move on to something else. The pulley here is, again, the thin belt pulley. There's a sleeve that goes here, and that sleeve needs to kind of get pressed on there, and that's the sleeve that interacts with the seal that's on here. So if you just kind of put this pulley on without that seal, it might feel a little weird to you. And it's like it's not going to seal, because it won't without that sleeve on there, and that, again, that needs to be pressed on. I'm going to put the pulley on, but I'm not going to be able to get it as tight as it needs to get, because I'm not going to lock the engine down. And don't forget you got a key on there, so you got to make sure you line the key up. And this thing gets torqued stock to like 100 foot-pounds or something, but because with the kit you delete the fan, it doesn't need to be torqued quite as much, and it gives you a spec. I think it's like 80 foot-pounds or something like that, which I'll verify when I get to that point that I'm ready to torque this down. But just something to be aware of if you decide to go to this aftermarket kit, but we'll just go ahead and essentially get it as tight as I can get it without spinning the motor. All right, so that's about it. We're gonna top dead center just because. All right, next up, we'll put the distributor in because I got it here and I might as well. As I think I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I had a little correction here that was pointed out to me. And the offset is in there a little bit. I just never had realized that, so you gotta make sure that when you put this guy down there that you observe that offset. But I should be good now, so now we just gotta essentially get it in top dead center. And lubricate this a little bit. All right, so there we go. Now I'm not going to worry about obviously timing or anything because I have no idea, but we will get these snug down here. All right, so again, obviously we're not going to tighten that up because I'm not setting timing right now, but that's in there, kind of snugged up. Next up is going to be the cap. Now this is a cap that's got the screw in post. I've never used these before. But essentially what you do is you put the line in, and then there's a piercing screw in the bottom. You just screw it down and it pierces the cable and gives you a connection. I don't think these got a great reputation, but I kind of like the look of them. So we're going to put this on here, and then I've got a wire set, as you can obviously see, from TRF, and obviously before the fire. And we'll figure out which goes to which. All right, so looking at the workshop manual, it doesn't really matter which wires go to which. I just have to remember, so 1 and 2 are on the top, 3 and 4, 1, 3, 2, 4, not a problem. So we'll go ahead, we'll get those all the way seated and screw the little things down and get them tight. And then I'm going to put the plugs in as well, and then come back and show you when it's done. All right, so this thing looks like a little bit of a half an octopus. So I got them all in there and tight. And I also took resistance from the end into the inside just to make sure I got penetration, less than an ohm on all of them. So seems to have worked. So we'll get the cap on. Now I am going to get the spark plugs in there, but I'm not going to tighten them down because I don't want to crush the seal yet. I'm sure they'll be in and out more than once, but we'll get them lined up. And that'll be a little bit further along to make the engine looking pretty. So sometimes when you're looking for spark plugs, you find other parts that you forgot. So this is the lifting eye for this side of the motor, and that's why those 2 bolts were longer, because that fits right there. So the 2 long bolts that I have down here, I'll remove, swap them for these 2 long bolts up here, and I'll do like a 1-for-1 swap so I don't lose the tension, but I'm not going to do that now. I'll let this thing set up here for a couple days until I come back over, and then I'll take care of it. This thing needs to get painted anyway, so I've got a little while before I can do it. All right, so Champion spark plugs that I picked up from the motor factory, Lima 87 Yankee Charlie, L87YC. And I'm not going to tighten these down too much because I don't want to crush the little aluminum washer that's on there. Probably doesn't matter, but I'm just going to go finger tight. And I will hook the wires up because I can. All right, so the distributor's wired up. It's starting to look like a little bit more like a motor now. Next up, I'm going to move on to getting some of the cooling system on. The water pump right now is out with the Flying Dutchman out in Oregon for a rebuild. Hopefully I get that back in about a week or so. And that'll be the next major milestone, is getting that kind of stuff fit in. And then I'll move on to something else. So I'd mentioned I had forgotten the engine lift Padeye, or whatever you want to call it. So that guy goes right here. That's what takes the longer bolts because it's offset a little bit, standoffs. So we'll just go ahead, put this back together. Again, 15 foot-pounds on these guys. All right, not much to that. Also, you may notice I got the dipstick painted and installed here. And among other things, just trying to clean some stuff up. Next up is going to be the front with the water pump. I sent that away to the Flying Dutchman to get him to rebuild it, so I'll show you that. So I sent the original water pump back to the Flying Dutchman. He's in Oregon, I think. So for $158, including shipping, he takes this, guts it, rebuilds it, puts new seals and all that kind of stuff in, and puts a 5-bladed or 6-bladed impeller on it. I'll show you a close-up of that guy. You can see it's a little bit more of a modern design instead of just the straight-up square vanes that the originals use. Left the Zerk fitting in, however, it is not a, you don't have to grease this thing, so that's mainly for decoration. I might see if I can find like a cap or something, just so I don't forget one day and go to grease the water pump. But it spins pretty nice. So also sent along a gasket with it, and it looks like he shaved or machined or at least cleaned up and made sure that this seating surface was true here. There's some machining work that I don't remember seeing before I sent it back. And you can see, I think here, there's a big mouth on it here. And I didn't know if that was cracked or what. It's very sloppy, but I believe that is so you have a telltale in case you're leaking on a seal or something like that. You'll get some leakage there. But anyway, painted it up. Looks pretty nice. Worth the expense as far as I'm concerned. Again, keeping the new stuff when I can. So I've got to do some zinc plating on the bolts and the nuts and stuff up here. But we're going to go ahead and look at getting this water pump in, or at least the housing or something that I can do. So this here is the little heater control valve when you want heat in the car. This indirectly or kind of connects to the block. I'll show you that connection here in a second. It's not very complicated. It's just a little slide valve. So you have a cable that comes out of the passenger compartment. It connects up into this lever here. And then when you pull the cable to actuate the heat, pulls that and it essentially opens this valve up, and it allows water to come out of the block into this pipe here, which eventually makes its way into the heater core inside the passenger compartment, heat that up in the fan and all that kind of good stuff, and you get heat. Same setup that I have on the Spitfire. But this one does not look original, but it appears to be in halfway decent shape. So there's a little rivet right here that I'm going to drill out, and then this whole kind of top cap unscrews, and it'll come apart and allow me to inspect the rubber and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then when I'm happy with that, get it cleaned up, degreased, and all that kind of good stuff, and we'll get this refurbed and renewed for use. I'll show you real quick the penetration in the head where that water will come out. All the way in the back of the head here, this hole right here, here's your transition piece, and this screws in here, just barely clears the head stud. And essentially when you get this all tightened down, and it's pipe fitting, so it kind of is tapered, and I'll put some PTFE on this, and you essentially want it to fit out like that, at about that angle or so, give or take. And then the valve will screw in kind of like so. I don't know how much of a pain in the rear this is going to be to kind of line up and to get it to fit. I might have to pull this stud, but I'm not going to worry about that now. I'm going to get this thing heated up, or cleaned up, excuse me, first, and get it nice and purty, and hopefully it won't give me too much hassle. There is going to have to be some stuff here that I'll zinc plate, but it shouldn't be too bad. So we'll break this apart. I'll show you. So I popped the rivet out, and that unlocks this thing. Now I've got a couple bolts on here that I'm going to undo real quick just to kind of start taking stuff apart. So this little thing is where the cable connects. And then this is just a hold down for the cable. I got to get that screw out. All right, that's good. Now these things are not incredibly expensive, 20 or 30 bucks maybe. But again, you know, if I can save it, why not save it? I don't believe this is original. So you just twist that top cap off, and that comes apart, and you can see that the rubber in here is not in good shape at all. It's all cracked, pretty dry. But here's the actuator part. So there's a little cotter or a little split washer there that holds that together. So I'm thinking that this guy is probably not going to serve my needs, but we'll get it apart a little bit more and see. At least we can clean it up. And I think I have another one of these laying around from the Spitfire that was the wrong. Some of them are directional, or it's a little weird. I might be able to steal the rubber diaphragm from that. We'll see if we can find that. But let me get that out. I'll show you the inside of that, and I'll get this little split pin out. All right, a little flathead screwdriver to pry this split washer off. All right, and once that comes off, that whole valve should just kind of push out there. And it does. So you got that guy. It's all nasty and dirty. And then this guy comes out of there like that. See how it's kind of twisted? That's supposed to be like that, so it can move in that circle. And then the little bushing. So all that stuff needs to get cleaned up. And as far as the rubber in here goes, I don't quite remember how this connects. All right, and there's that rubber diaphragm piece. So again, this is, now, not completely horrible, but I don't really care for that being cracked. So let me go see if I can dig one up and see if that center diaphragm portion is the same thing, and then get this all cleaned up, get it degreased. So I was able to locate another one of these. This was is in better shape. It's not perfect, but it should be good enough. I do have some wintergreen oil that I can soak this in for an hour or so and get this softened up a little bit. So I'll bring that home and do that. Everything else here, I'm going to get into some purple power, get it into the ultrasonic sink, and get it degreased and cleaned up, and we'll see what it looks like when we're done. As you can see, I pulled that stud out. Not that big of a deal. So we're going to put some PTFE on this union here, as I like to do, and go ahead and get it installed. All right, that's about all I'm going to get there. So future reference, obviously important safety tip. Make sure you remove that stud before you try to put this one in. This stud is number 7 on the torque path. These are ARPs, if you remember from my engine rebuild. One nice thing about these is they've got a little Allen screw on the top, so you can kind of get it pre-started. Still got a good amount of lubrication on there from the ARP stuff. So we're going to go ahead and get that retorqued to whatever it is, 100, 105 foot-pounds. I'll look it up and put it there. So now we'll try to screw the body of the valve in here. And I think, unfortunately, no. So that's the way it needs to kind of go, like that. And that all lines up. So that's good. But obviously we need to get this thing rebuilt before I do that. So if you can hear the rumbling in the background, that's the ultrasonic sink. Got the pieces parts in there. But this guy is good here, so now we'll get that stud back in and torque down now that I know that this fits and it's not going to interfere at all, and we'll move on. Got our water pump housing here. Got that all painted up, and you can see where I've left the gasket transition here, or the gasket mating surface, kind of left that off of paint. And on the back side, you got the same thing. So that guy kind of fits up like so. And then you've got 3 bolts that put that in. One of those bolts is through the water pump, and then 2 studs. And then the water pump just kind of sits in there, and that'll go on. That's obviously got a gasket too. But you got to kind of put it all in one shot. Why they did it that way, I don't know, but that's how they did it. So you do have 3 bolts, like I had mentioned, and 2 of them go into the bottom here on the water pump housing. Those are the same length. But then this one here, which goes through the water pump, that's going to be a little bit longer. So you want to make sure that you got your lengths correct. A little bit easier than the Spitfire, which had the same kind of setup. It had 3 different lengths, which obviously the workshop manual, not obviously, but the workshop manual didn't tell you what was what, so it was a pain in the rear. But we'll go ahead and we'll get this guy put on, the gasket sealer and all that kind of good stuff, get the water pump, get it all torqued down, and then that'll be it for the motor for this video. All right, I've already got both sides of the gasket and the one side of this union done. So we're just going to go ahead now and bolt the pump housing in. Now we'll paint the surface for the water pump and the gasket and all that kind of stuff, and then get that guy in. All right, and the pump goes in with the grease fitting towards the top, and that bolt on the bottom, the long one. And then lock washer and bolts up here. Now, one thing I do have that I'm not putting on right now, and again, it'll be the same thing where I let the gasket stuff pull up or set up and then pull a bolt back off. There's like a little hanger that's in paint right now that as I think it's the fuel line and maybe like the vacuum line come across to go to the carburetors. You've got, because the fuel pump's on this side, so the fuel line comes across the front of the water pump, similar routing to the Spitfire, and that little hanger is just a J-hook, just hangs that stuff, and it goes off of one of these bolts. I'm not sure which. I have pictures, but I'll get that when I get to it. So now we'll grab a 9/16 socket, torque wrench, all that kind of good stuff, get that tightened up, and that'll be it. So I got the water pump in and all torqued down, but unfortunately, if you can hear this, I got a little rubbing of the pump and the water pump housing that I didn't have until I got it tightened down. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to take that apart. And of course, I double buy on gaskets all the time, but I can just barely, not really even turn it by hand. So that's not gonna work. So we'll see if I can figure out the interference, get the water pump off first, and then maybe have to take the whole thing back apart. So I took it apart, and it's pretty clear that it's this lip down here. And if you can tell, it's not real easy to see, but that's the only place really where just the pump goes all the way in, the pump body. So, and there's essentially used like the gasket sealer itself kind of scrapes across. And if I put the pump up and center it, put it all the way to the top, like force it up within the tolerance of the holes, I won't get any rubbing. If I move it down, I could pick up some rubbing. If I move it this way, it's a little bit more. If I move it that way, it clears it. So what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of either sandpaper or something to just kind of trim that down a little bit over there. Obviously, I want to clean this all up before I put it back in the car so I don't have metal shavings and stuff and make it a mess with the gasket sealer. The reason I'm not going to I'm afraid if I just try to slide the pump over and then tighten it down to where I don't get any interference, I'm afraid that over time it might shift, and then eventually I'm going to start knocking metal to metal, and I'd rather not do that. And I don't think I need to take off very much at all to accomplish what I'm trying to do here. So some sandpaper or like a little grinding wheel, something just to kind of clean that up. All right, well, obviously this is going to take a lot of iterations here, so I'll come back when I think I've got it all shaved down, no interference now. I'm going to go ahead and gasket seal everything, put this puppy back on, and hopefully it'll work when I get it bolted up. Got it all back together, got it all torqued down. Now it just spins with no noise whatsoever. So just, the bigger impeller or the different impeller that the Flying Dutchman puts on, I'm sure there's tolerances and machining differences and everything. Not going to expect it to be perfect, but it's definitely good to go now. So again, as I mentioned, I'm going to take a rest from the motor for a little while now and move on to other things. But for now, that's all I got for this video. Thanks again for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.